This product is a product of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. Nothing in this podcast should be considered legal advice. To find a collaborative professional near you, visit www.collaborativepracticeflorida.com. I'm Catherine Eaton, a collaborative family law attorney with the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals. And today's guest is Dr. Randy Heller. Dr. Randy Heller received her doctorate in family therapy from Nova Southeastern University, wrote her dissertation on the role of the mental health professional working in collaborative divorce, and has multiple publications on this topic. She is an educator, exceptional student specialist, and couples, marriage, and family therapist. She's licensed both as a mental health counselor and marriage and family therapist in Florida, New York, and Connecticut. She works as a Florida certified Supreme Court family mediator, qualified parenting coordinator, reunification specialist, trained hypnotherapist, and founder and clinical director of the Family Network, Collaborative Counseling Center for Positive Growth and Change, which was established in 1994. She has been with the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals for over 15 years and has served as the vice president, the president of the Collaborative Family Law Professionals of South Florida, and is now a board member of the New York Association of Collaborative Professionals. And for all of those reasons and many more, that's why she is our guest today. So thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
I wanted to start our conversation with, how did you get involved with collaborative law? How did you find out? How did you decide this was something you were interested in and you wanted to be a part of?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun story, actually. I was working as a psychotherapist, family therapist, and so often people would come in and they'd drop their kids off and say, "Fix my kids, I had a terrible divorce," or "I can't move forward in my life because I had a terrible divorce," or "I'm afraid of relationships because I had a terrible divorce." So working as a therapist who saw children, adolescents, adults, and couples, I recognized that there was a strong need to help people who were going through divorce do it in a different way. Additionally, I was teaching the county course that parents are required to take for co-parenting in divorce. And I was teaching that pretty much pro bono because I had such a strong feeling about helping families to do it differently. And that really came from, and if you read my dissertation, you'll know that I come from a legacy of divorce, high conflict, aggressive family background. And really, I wanted to find a way to bring peace to children and families. So I started working with couples who I would see in therapy. And of course, I couldn't see them in any other role if I was working with them as a therapist, but I would steer them toward just a more peaceful kind of communication without knowing anything formally about the collaborative law movement, if you will. And what I would find is they would leave my office on a Thursday and they would feel pretty confident that they could co-parent and share their marital assets and liabilities and find a way to manage this transition in a better way. And so, as I said, they'd leave pretty confident. And then by Monday morning, my phone would ring and they had talked to their lawyers. And their lawyers would tell them, "Oh, no, don't make any agreements like that, because if you do X, you can get Y." And things would blow up. So then I decided to become certified as a family mediator. And I thought, okay, then I'll have more credibility. And what I found, even though I had the certification, I found that I really wasn't confident in helping couples to know more about the law or know more about finances. And even though as a mediator, we're to be neutral and not provide them with advice, I still didn't know even enough to educate them. And I didn't feel like I was giving them a good opportunity to make a good settlement. I could help them talk about anything, but I didn't feel like I could help them come to terms on a sustainable agreement. So then I decided, okay, let me learn more about this. And I was going to an AFCC conference, Association for Families and Conciliation Courts, true story. And I thought, okay, this is my first time at the conference, but I understand there's financial people there, there's legal people there. Maybe I could team up with these people and I could come up with a way that we could work together and help these families, since I don't feel confident about the law and I don't feel confident about finances. And when I got there, I learned that there was this whole movement called collaborative divorce, and I really thought it was my idea. I said to myself, oh, wow, I thought this was my idea. However, the beautiful part was that it was already in place and beginning and, gathering momentum. And then when I came back to South Florida, I learned more about collaborative practice and then felt like I didn't know enough. And I was back in my doctoral program, and I decided to study the mental health professional working in this process so that we could learn more how to best utilize us. Like when they developed collaborative practice, what were they thinking about the mental health professional and how we can be best utilized in the process? And there were lots of different opinions on that. So then I went and I did my research, and here I am. That was in 2011, and here I am now, really helping families to make a peaceful transition, helping them on the front end learn a better way to communicate, share their children, resolve problems, and come together in the best interests of their children. And so that's really been the trajectory of my life since way back then. And it's exciting. It's continually exciting and evolving and growing. And I feel thrilled to be a part of this movement, because when families move through in a collaborative divorce, if they do it well, they learn things that they never knew in their failed marriages. And so they're learning how to do things better and different, and really preserving their own well-being and the well-being of their children. So it's very exciting.
Would
And
you,
that's my story.
yes, that's a great story. Would you please share the difference between what you do in the collaborative process versus what you do? You touched on it, that there is a difference. What you do if couples come to you and whether they're trying to separate themselves or work to get back together, what's the difference between that therapeutic setting versus your role in the collaborative process?
Yeah, that's a great question, Catherine, because people aren't really clear. So as a therapist, I really am trained to help people to understand what's not working in their lives and find ways to do something different about that. So it may very well be that when they come to me, they're just trying to decide, do I want to move forward and get divorced? Do I want to stay married? Do I want to try to work on my marriage? They may not know. And so when they first call me, they're in what we call a contemplative state, and they're trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to be? And so I can talk with them as what I call a consultant and help them to understand that there are many directions they can go in, and many directions they can go in with me. Being trained as a psychotherapist, I'm going to try to help them to figure out, okay, what is it that's missing? What is it that's lacking in terms of their finding satisfaction in their relationship or even in their own lives, and figuring out, okay, how do they want to move forward? Do they want to move forward working with their partner? Do they want to move forward working on themselves? Do they want to figure out how to resolve that problem in terms of staying in their marriage? If that's something they want to work on, or even just to figure out if they want to stay in their marriage, I can do that with them. And then they will decide, are we working as a couple on preserving our marriage? And if they are, then we're going to do that with a commitment of a period of time, probably. And then they'll figure out which direction they want to go into. Once I've worked with them as a couples therapist, if they decide to get divorced, I'm not going to work with them in another capacity. However, if I'm only working with them as a consultant and I'm informing them about the different processes that are available to them, if they do decide that they'd rather move into the divorce arena, then I can help them there. when I'm working with them as a divorce facilitator, or even working with one entity of the couple as a coach, if you will, I'm really helping them to move through the divorce process. If I'm in the role of a neutral facilitator, then I'm working as one person, working with both entities of the couple and the team of professionals, helping them to navigate all of the necessary steps to take them through the divorce process. We sit around a table, we sign contract agreements not to go to court. I'm helping them to communicate in a different way than they've ever known how to do, usually in their marriages. I'm helping them to identify what's important to them in terms of getting through the divorce, and how will they know when those things are in place. I'm helping them to figure out how to co-parent their children in separate households, if they have them, or how to navigate even having adult children come home for the holidays, special occasions, what's going to happen with their adult children. Or if they don't have children, what's going to happen with their extended family, what's going to happen with their friends and colleagues that they share during their marriage. So I will help them with that. I'll also help the team with organization and time management, and making sure we're being most efficient, and making sure we're being most cost effective for the clients. If they don't need all of us to be present in a meeting at a certain juncture, then we don't need to spend time with them in doing that. I was just working on a case where we were into our third hour, and the husband and the wife were talking about splitting their assets, and they were having a wonderful conversation. Really, we were all just witness to it. And I said, well, why don't we just let them continue this conversation without us? Because they're paying us hundreds and hundreds of dollars an hour to just witness this wonderful conversation. And they were thrilled that I suggested that, because it saved them thousands of dollars, and they were able to come to terms. So it all depends on how much support they need, but we're there to support them and move them through the process in the best way possible for their individual family needs.
Thank you for sharing that. So when you're in the collaborative process and there starts to be some, I mean, you just told a wonderful story of how the couples are communicating and they're working it out, and they don't even need the professionals there, and everyone backed off and let them communicate and make decisions. What happens when you have the opposite going on, that this couple, yes, they're in the collaborative process, but it's not so, their communication skills are not so smooth? What can be done, and what can you do, or what have you seen? What are some tips to help the parties through the process when things are not so smooth?
Yeah, that's another great question, because sometimes there is misinformation about the collaborative process, and people expect that it's just going to be all kumbaya and everyone's going to be happy and move through without any angst. And really, that's an unrealistic expectation, because most of the people who come to us, yes, they want a peaceful process, and yes, they want to be efficient and cost effective. However, many of them are still angry and hurting and feeling betrayed and not trusting one another and disagreeing about how to raise and co-parent their children. And so really what I'm doing with them when I first meet them is I am normalizing all of that. I'm letting them know that I understand that if they knew how to get along, communicate, solve their problems, co-parent their children, it's probably unlikely they'd be getting divorced. And so I let them know that I understand that, and I'm trying to figure out, and that kind of goes back to your question before this one about what I do in terms of, I'm not doing therapy, but what am I doing? So I'm identifying what are hot topics for them. I'm identifying what do they need to get accomplished in order for this divorce to go smoothly. Do they want to stay in their house? Do they need to sell their house? Are they moving out of the school district? Are they going to stay in the school district? Are they involved with somebody else? Aren't they involved with somebody else? What is their vision for how their life is going to look? And how can I help them to manifest that in a way that still serves the interests of the entire family? So I'm helping them to figure out how to do that in this process, and I'm letting them know I understand that they don't know how. And we're there as a team with different expertise. Each member of the team has a different area of expertise, and we can help them on an individual basis to address their area of interest or need. And then we integrate those knowledge and those skills, and we help them as a team to figure out whatever they need to figure out in order to move through the divorce process, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. You know, I'm an attorney and I'm used to representing one of the parties and, you know, advocating on their behalf. So you as a facilitator and a mental health professional, you're a neutral. So can you talk a little bit about that skill set, which I don't bring to the table necessarily, as much as a professional team player I want to be. Can you talk a little bit about what it takes to be a neutral, and also what it takes to manage the attorneys who who aren't used to being a neutral?
Yeah, so that's a great point, because when you're advocating for one client, you tend to only see and hear and understand that client's perspective. I'm trained in what we call systems theory. And what systems theory does, it helps the observer understand that in any system, there are multiple things happening simultaneously. There are multiple perspectives happening simultaneously. There are multiple circumstances happening simultaneously. And each one of those things impacts another entity of the system. And so everything keeps shifting as things happen in the system. And so my role is really to help everyone understand all the things that are happening simultaneously in the system. And so what I really believe is that nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens in isolation. And one thing, as I described, impacts another. So for an example, I'm working on a matter where the husband is quite impulsive and volatile, and the wife is quite passive and avoidant. However, many of the things that she does is like poking the bear and poking the bear and poking the bear. And they're just bad together, which is why they're getting divorced. And they came to terms about that. And I was at an event not too long ago with the wife's attorney, and we got a call that there was an aggressive episode happening at the home. And the call was from the wife to her lawyer. And of course, the first thing the lawyer did was advocate for her client and say, he's got to leave the house. He's got to get out of the house. He can't be there. And I said, well, wait, let's listen to both sides of the story. Let's listen to what's going on. Yes, they have to separate, but we don't know what that means in terms of who goes and who stays. And so they're both living in the marital home. Anyway, after speaking with both of them, I was able to really identify the reality that they were just poking each other. And so it wasn't just about one person being victimized. It was about both people antagonizing each other. And so we came up with a strategy for both of them to separate and still live in the marital home, so the children didn't have to move until they sold the home. And so we came up with some nesting opportunity for them. But my point is it was really important for me to help her attorney see that she had a part in this. And even though, nobody has a right to lay a hand on another or touch another or be aggressive with another, typically in situations, and this is not such a widely accepted realization when we talk about domestic violence, but oftentimes there are two parts to the equation. And we really have to recognize that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And that oftentimes when these parts come together, that's when we see the combustion. So we have to help them to come together in a different way. And we have to recognize that there's nothing happening in isolation. And so that's really important when you're advocating for a client, to know that sometimes when you're protecting them, you're not really advocating for them. You think you are, You think you're helping them, but if you're protecting them too much to the point where they're not seeing their part in the problem, then they're not going to be able to see their part in the solution. And that's where I come in, is trying to help everyone to see their part, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you one off the cuff. It's toward the end of the year. It's November. The holidays are here. The end of the year is here. There's people who have made the decision that they're going to start the divorce process, and hopefully they're making the decision that they're going to move through in the collaborative process. Do you have any tips for parties who are starting the divorce process, starting the collaborative process, just to in getting through the holidays? I mean, that just adds extra pressure. So now you're going to get a divorce. You know, things are changing. The holidays are here. I mean, any tips from, the collaborative process in the holidays to just going through the stressful time during the holidays? Any tips that you can tell us?
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about the collaborative process is that we can troubleshoot. We can address what's coming in a different way than you could in a court of law, of course, because you're not really having productive conversations. In a court of law, we're saying attack and defend. And here around the collaborative table, we're saying, okay, what's the problem? Let's identify it. And let's see if we can come up with some solutions. So, of course, over the last several weeks, I've been working with couples on, okay, how do you want to share the children over the holidays? So typically it begins with a conversation about, what's happening in the family right now. So are you still staying in the same residence? Are you living separately? What do the children know? How much do they understand? All of those things are going to be different for every family. And so we talk about how do they typically do it? What are the children anticipating? And again, what do the children know? Because really what I want to impart to all the parents who are listening is that children really just want to know, how is this going to impact my life? How are things going to change? What's going to happen around Christmas? What's going to happen around Thanksgiving? Whose house are we going to go to? What do I have to decide? And how is this going to look different than maybe my friend's household? And so we want to help them to normalize and stabilize. And so think about what it is that you've done in the past and how that might change. So if the children really look forward to a Thanksgiving meal, then you might, if you can, still have it together if you are still kind of living in the same domain. If you're not, then you might decide to have, a Thanksgiving brunch and a Thanksgiving dinner, and you might alternate. One parent has a brunch and the other parent has a dinner. What I've also suggested is, Thanksgiving, who said that Thanksgiving has to be on the third Thursday of the month? So it could be Thanksgiving on Thursday and leftovers on Friday, or Thanksgiving on Thursday and then Thanksgiving again on Friday. Every family can really come up and create their own ideal. What we really want to think about is, what do the children want? What's the story that the children are going to tell when they're older and they tell about how they shared their holidays? How important is it for them to be home on Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or any one of those holidays? How important is it for them to be with both parents? I hear parents talking about it's a perfect time to take a vacation, but if you take a vacation, then your child may not be able to share the holiday with both parents. So you want to consider that and how important that's going to be to them, not to you, but to them. That to me is most important. And so, again, we at the collaborative table can really craft plans for the holidays that fit your individual family and your children and your children's needs. And that's what makes it beautiful, because you're having an opportunity to talk about it. And you may not love the way that the plan turns out. However, hopefully it's going to be an alternating plan. And so if it's not great this year, maybe it'll be better next year. But again, what's best for your children? That's really what we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. And
Before we go, I just wanted to, I gave a little brief bio to you, but can you please tell whoever's listening where in Florida you primarily practice? Now with Zoom, you can pretty much practice anywhere throughout the state.
I do. So I practiced in South Florida for 30 years. And now I'm practicing all over Florida, from Gainesville to Miami. And I also practice in New York City and in Connecticut. So if you're on any one of those ends, I am able to see you on Zoom, and it's been very, very productive. And again, sometimes people come just for a consultation to figure out what do they want to do next, and other times they're here, you know, for me to help them transition through the whole process.
Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.